Get back to basics with Judaism 101 with Rabbi Michael Katz.
Hi and welcome. This is Rabbi Michael Katz here with you. This is Judaism 101.9. It is Thursday. It's 11:11 as we look at the clock in the studio. 11 minutes past 11 on this beautiful Thursday morning here in Joburg. And today, the 16th day of Menachem Av, is the Yortzeit of a famous man by the name of Sir Moses Montefiore. Passed away in 1885. Now, who was he? He was a religious philanthropist who worked tirelessly on behalf of his brethren worldwide and especially in Israel. He dispensed large sums of money towards charitable causes. He founded many establishments and institutions, and he traveled far and wide to visit Jewish communities, interceding on their behalf before rulers such as Queen Victoria, Tsar Alexander II, Ottoman Sultan, and the Pope. And he lived to the ripe old age of 100, passing away on the 16th of Menachem Av in 5645 in 1885. On this day, tomorrow and Shabbos both mark a story that took place in Israel with a ring of great familiarity, unfortunately, to modern times, to the last couple of years. So I'll tell you the story, and then we'll reflect back and think of how it applied and what it was all about. Well, a riot broke out and a massacre followed in Hebron in Israel. Now this was, and it cost the lives of 67 men, women and children who were slaughtered, many wounded, raped and maimed by Arab neighbors. This all took place not on October the 7th, but on the 17th of Av and the 18th of Av in 1929 in the city of Hebron, where the Arab neighbors of the Jews in Hebron rioted for 3 days, and their cries were, "Kill the Jews, slaughter the Jews." And the killings began on Friday afternoon, the 17th of Av, while most of the victims lost their lives, unfortunately, on the Shabbos of the 18th of Av. And then the survivors were forced to evacuate to Jerusalem, the ancient Jewish community of Hebron, which had been their homes and had lived there in peace for hundreds of years. It wasn't actually revived until 1967, when Israel recaptured Hebron in the Six-Day War. So, same story, different day, as they say, going all the way back to 1929, where the cries for slaughtering of the Jews in Hebron cost the lives of 67 Jewish men, women and children. The slaughter, the murder, the wounding, the raping, the maiming, all unfortunately too familiar. Shabbos this week, the 18th of Av, saw the Western lamp being extinguished. Now this was around about 578 before the Common Era, which of course is going back to the first Beit HaMikdash, the first temple. Now what had happened was every evening the Kohen would light the 7 lights of the menorah in the Holy Temple, and miraculously, although 6 of the 7 candles would burn out, the Western lamp would remain lit until the following evening. During the reign of the idolatrous King Achaz, father of the pious King Chizkiah, this miracle discontinued. So the miracle stopped, and the first time the Western lamp was found to have been extinguished was actually on the 18th of Menachem Av. There are some who say it was actually the 17th, but it seems to be the predominant view that it was on the 18th of Menachem Av that the lamp miracle stopped in the temple, the first temple, 578 before the Common Era. Now, the 19th of Av, which is Sunday, our last one for today, is that it's the Yortzeit of Rabbi Yaakov Kuli in 1732. He was born in Yerushalayim in 1689, moved to Constantinople in Turkey, found adequate facilities and financial backing to publish the scholarly output of his learned grandfather, Rabbi Moshe ibn Habib, including classics such as Get Poshet and Ezras Nashim. He was a brilliant scholar, quickly came to the attention of the chief rabbi of Constantinople, and who was the Sephardi Jewish leader of the time, and he was appointed to the Beth Din. And upon that rabbi's passing, Rabbi Yaakov edited and published his late teacher's writings with his own additional glosses called Mishnah Lamelech and Maimonides Mishnah Torah, on Maimonides Mishnah Torah and Precious Drachim. Towards the end of his own short life, Rabbi Kuli began the work on Ma'am Lo'ez, famously, a compendium of rabbinic law and commentary on all the books of Torah. He wrote in Ladino, which was then the common language, and unfortunately he never completed the project and passed away on the 19th of Av in 1732 or 5492, having only completed the book of Bereshis and most of Exodus. However, subsequent scholars used his extensive notes to finish the work, and it is popular to this day that Ma'am Lo'ez and it's been translated into many languages, including Hebrew, English, and even Arabic. So when we go back in history and we see these familiar things that have happened during this time, it all has a great bearing on the period of time that we're in, but perhaps none as much as the Chag, the festival that we commemorated, that we celebrated yesterday. Now, many are going to look around and say, what festival? What festival did we celebrate yesterday? You know, it's just a week after Tisha B'Av, we're just getting over the fast. What happened yesterday? Well, yesterday was the 15th of Menachem Av, and on the 15th of Menachem Av, Chamisha Osar B'Av, or as many have popularized it and called it Tu B'Av, is a great Chag, a great festival, so much so that the Talmud tells us that there were no days as happy for Am Yisrael, for the Jewish people, as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Compared to Yom Kippur for happiness, seems to be somewhat off there. What about the happiness of Yom Kippur? Well, if we think about it, the majority of us have stuck in our heads, in our minds, that Yom Kippur is a sad day. It's not a sad day at all. On the contrary, Yom Kippur is phrased here as being the happiest day of the year. Why? We have been exonerated. It's a day of kapara, atonement. Could you imagine? It's a day on which we get rid of all the demons, we get rid of all the negativity in ourselves, we get rid of all the things that stand before our actual application and ability to do what we need to do. That's Yom Kippur.
Get back to basics with Judaism 101 with Rabbi Michael Katz.
So welcome back. This is Rabbi Michael Katz. This is Judaism 101.9, and let's just explore for a moment, because I think it's still relevant, what yesterday was all about, the 15th of Av. A lot of people don't necessarily know the 15th of Av. It hasn't perhaps been as popularized as the 15th of Shvat, and in fact people sometimes confuse them when you say the 15th, so automatically the minds jump to 15th of Shvat, which is known as Tu B'Shvat, and that's all got to do with the trees and the planting of trees and so on in people's minds, although really it is something much, much deeper than that. And the 15th of Av, well, unfortunately, perhaps it has got the tagline of being known as Valentine's Day in Israel. It is a day of love and a day of marriage and so on. Well, where did this actually all come about, and is that not actually taking it just a little bit out of context and perhaps putting it into sort of almost like many of the modern dates and days, a Mother's Day and a Father's Day and a gifting day and a Valentine's Day per se, all of those things have become popularized just because, I guess, they sell cards and gifts and all that sort of stuff. Maybe. But let's take a closer look at what the 15th of Av was actually all about and how relevant it actually is for these days following it as well, in the build-up to and the thought of the fact that we are now 6 weeks before Yom Tov, 6 weeks to go till Rosh Hashanah. And so it's got quite a lot to do with that as well. And let's just see. So, number one, the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel told us that there were no greater festivals for Israel, as we mentioned before, than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. And it says that on these days, the daughters of Jerusalem would go out and dance in the vineyards. And they would say, young man, raise your eyes and see which you select for yourself. And the Talmud then goes on to list several joyous occasions and events that occurred on the 15th day of the month of Av. So they start off by telling us that it was celebrated by the daughters going out and dancing. It was celebrated by the fact that shidduchim were made, that marriages were made. And that's the celebration of it. But what caused the celebration? What was it actually all about? Well, if we just pause for a moment and think about how relevant it is that marriages are made, that we talk about the building of Jewish families, of homes. Yeah, unfortunately, in a more modern world, marriage has kind of become a little bit, in many circles, it's become, in inverted commas, old-fashioned. But there is nothing stronger and more important for Am Yisrael, for the Jewish people, and for Jewish life than a proper Jewish family, than a proper marriage. And so when those happen, the Simcha, the joy, is profound, not only for the couple involved and their families, but for the whole Jewish people. The mainstay of Jewish life is the Jewish home and the Jewish family. And when we think about it in those terms, so here we had a rekindling of the idea of marriage that was taking place by the daughters of Jerusalem dancing on the 15th of Av in the vineyards, and kind of tempting the young men to lift up your eyes and see which you select for yourself. A direct quote from the Gemara in Tainus. And the reason for it all was, number one, and we'll see how they all link together, I hope, that in the time of the Exodus, the generation of the Exodus stopped dying. Now, what was this all about? So, several months after the people of Israel were freed from Mitzrayim, we got out of Egyptian slavery, the spies were sent by the Jewish people to check out Israel. And the spies, we know, went into Israel. They toured the land. They went from length and breadth and all over the place, and they checked it out. And they made some startling findings, because they came back. There were 12 of them, one representing each tribe of Israel. And these spies came back, and 10 out of 12, vast majority of them, discouraged the Jewish people from going into Israel. Only 2 of them, famously, Hoshea bin Nun, Joshua, and Kalev ben Yefuneh, were the only ones who gave a good report and said that if God deems that we should go this way, it's going to be good. Everything's going to be fine. The fact that we saw giants there and we saw people dying, and we realized all sorts of difficulties that we may have to confront, both physical and spiritual, it's doable and we need to advance. But the majority said no. And they dissuaded the Jewish people from doing what they were beckoned to do by God and Moshe, to go into Israel. And the Jewish people sat and cried. Now, why did they cry, and when did they cry? Well, it was the return of the spies was on the 8th of Av, and they cried on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av. And Hashem, like a father, remember it's the month of Av, where the father is dominant. The father says, as our fathers probably said to us as well, don't cry for no reason. You cry for no reason, I'll give you a reason to cry. And the Jewish people were then made to stay in the desert. Well, you didn't want to go into Israel. You found that it was going to be a burial place for you, and that was all that it was going to mean. And so no advancement to Israel. We want to stay in the desert. That was what they opted for. But remember, they had food on call. They had water on tap. They had clothing that grew on them. They were not supposed to die in the desert. And here God says, okay, you don't want to go in. We're going to spend the rest of these 40 years wandering around in this desert. And the whole generation that cried tonight is going to need to die out. And once they have died out, we will then advance, we'll then be able to go into Israel. And that's what happened. And in fact, it was after 40 years of wandering through the desert that the dying of that generation, of the 600,000 men who needed to die out, was actually completed. And a new generation stood ready to go into Israel, into the Holy Land. And it was actually marked by the 15th of Av, because what had happened was all the deaths of the people in the desert took place on Tisha B'Av. 15,000 per year, they say, died on Tisha B'Av. And everybody was expecting this to continue, not quite sure of the count. And in that last year came Tisha B'Av and nobody died, and they realized that something here was going on, not quite sure. Maybe they'd made a mistake, maybe it was the wrong date. When the 10th passed, and then the 11th and the 12th and the 13th, when they came to the 15th and they beheld the beautiful full moon, like we saw in the sky last night. If you took a look at that moon, it was a 15th moon, the 15th day of the month moon, which is completely full, and it was the sign of Geula, it was the sign of redemption. They knew then that everybody who beheld it, everybody who stood there on that day, on the 15th of Av, at the end of the 40 years in the desert, was going to cross over the Jordan and go into Israel. They knew that the decree was over. And so this ending of the decree, the advancement of Geula, of redemption, was what this day actually was all about. Now, in addition to that, there were other things that throughout history happened on this day. And if we think about them carefully, they all have a very similar theme. Now, what had happened was the tribes of Israel, let's go forward now, we crossed over, we arrived in Israel, there was the division of the land, and once the land was divided, there was a discrepancy or a difficulty that arose when women who were permitted, we know the daughters of Tzlofchad put forward their campaign, and when women inherited from their fathers, and they had land in their tribal ownership, in their tribal land, and if they were to marry into another tribe, who owned that land? Since they owned it, and now they married to a man from another tribe, and they belong to another tribe, and they have his land as well, what do we do with the land that they owned in their tribe? And because of this complication, and because they couldn't find a way of working it all out, unfortunately, the sages saw fit at the time to say, you know what, we are not going to permit marriages between the different tribes. Because you can't sort out your money issues, your land issues, your property issues, how is this going to be a good foundation for the building of a Jewish home? And they banned for a generation the intermarriage between the tribes. It was only afterwards that on the 15th of Av, they lifted this ban. They chose that date and they lifted the ban on the 15th of Av, a generation later, and there was great celebration and great festivity. There was another time that intermarriage was also forbidden between some of the tribes. What had happened was the excommunication of the tribe of Benjamin from marriage because of the behavior of men from the tribe of Binyamin in the incident that is called the concubine of Giva, the Pelegesh Begiva. It's related in Judges 19 to 21, where you can read up about it. There was a terrible incident that had taken place. A woman was abused, and because of this one woman being abused, the sages saw fit to ban the intermarriage with the men of Binyamin because no one came forward, took ownership of or responsibility for this terrible incident. The sages of the day said no intermarriage into the tribe of Binyamin, and it was actually during the judgeship of Othniel ben Kenaz, who led the people of Israel from 1228 to 1188 before the Common Era. And in fact, this ban was also it was lifted after that generation had passed, and it happened to be that they chose to lift it also on the 15th of Av. There was something else that happened, the lifting of bans, and that was Hoshea ben Elah opened the roads to Yerushalayim. Now, when the Holy Land of Israel was divided into two kingdoms following the death of King Solomon, Yeravam ben Nevat, who was the ruler of the breakaway northern kingdom of Israel, he set up roadblocks to prevent his citizens from making the pilgrimage on Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, the capital of the southern kingdom of Judah, of Yehuda. Could you imagine? Here we had a Jewish, in inverted commas, two-state solution, and there was no solution at all. There was animosity, there was difficulty, and the Northern Kingdom rulers, unfortunately, were idol worshippers, and they didn't want their people coming down to Yerushalayim, a terrible blot on our memories and on our history. And then they finally, after more than 200 years, yes, you heard that correctly, these blockades were up, and the blockages of people traveling from the northern territory of Israel into the area of Yehuda to go to the Beit HaMikdash, to go to the temple, Second Temple times. They finally were removed by Hoshea ben Elah on the 15th of Av in 3187 or 574 before the Common Era. They lifted these bans, they took away these blockades, they reallowed the Jews from the north to travel to the south and go to the Beit HaMikdash, go to the temple, bring their offerings, participate in Pesach, Shavuot and Sukkot. It all happened on the 15th of Av. What else happened? The fortress of Beitar, which was the last holdout of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. We mentioned this in our shir last week our talk last week when we spoke on Tisha B'Av. Beitar fell on the 9th of Av, on Tisha B'Av, in 133 of the Common Era. Bar Kokhba and many thousands of Jews were killed in that battle, and the Romans massacred the survivors with great cruelty, and they wouldn't allow the people that they had massacred to be buried. They left them lying there unburied. And finally, in 148 of the Common Era, so that's a full 15 years later, they allowed and permitted the reburial, or the burial rather, of those people, the dead of Beitar. This happened on the 15th of Av. And in fact, to celebrate it, a special bracha was added into our Birkat HaMazon and into our blessings after a meal. Hatov HaMeitiv, it was added in commemoration of this event. And finally, for the events that happened in history on the 15th of Av, it was the day of the breaking of the axe. When the Holy Temple stood in Jerusalem, the annual cutting of firewood for the Mizbeach, for the altar in the temple, was concluded on the 15th of Av. The 15th of Av became synonymous with Midsummer's Day in Israel. And therefore, there was a great event that was held on this day, and it was celebrated with feasting and rejoicing, as is the custom upon the conclusion of every and any holy endeavor. And it included a ceremonial story, which was the breaking of the axes, and it gave the day its name, the day of the breaking of the axe. So we think about here, this was a time when decrees were broken, when axes were broken, where hatchets were buried, where things were forgotten and the Jewish people moved on. Not abandoned, not forgotten forever, but we turned around and we said, this is the way forward, a way of Simcha, a way of joy. And therefore we see how it is compared to Yom Kippur, and how the 15th of Av lays down the pathway for the time from the middle of the month of Av until Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Get back to basics with Judaism 101 with Rabbi Michael Katz.
Yes, and welcome back. This is Rabbi Michael Katz here with you. We are on Judaism 101.9. Now, are you looking to reach an engaged, loyal audience? There's no better place to do it than right here on Chai FM. Our listeners tune in every day for music, conversation, and news that you can trust. When you advertise on Chai FM, you're not just buying airtime, you're becoming part of a community that genuinely listens. Whether you're a small business or an established brand, we'd love to have a conversation about how we can work together. WhatsApp us on 061-895-1019. That's 061-895-1019. Or you can email us at info@chaifm.com, and we'll reach out to you. It's Chai FM, part of your day, every day. Well, we're talking about the 15th of Av, and the amazing thing is that we did mention that it marks the middle of the summer in Israel. Now, yes, we know that it's a lunar date, but there are a number of these lunar dates that come up in our thinking about how it marks the middle of the summer, and maybe it might not be exactly accurate for exactly the length of the days, but generally from the 15th of Av, it starts getting a little cooler in Israel, although we see that over this next short while there's going to be another heat wave in Israel. So as the temperatures start dropping, also the night becomes a little bit longer. And perhaps that's where we need to focus for a moment. As the nights become longer and the days become shorter, what it means is there is a diminishing of light and an increase in darkness. Now, when Jews confront the idea of light and darkness, we term it in terms of good and bad. We look at it in terms of Torah and the, God forbid, the absence of Torah. And so it was always a tradition that from the 15th of Av, people would strive to lengthen their Torah study, their involvement in Torah and mitzvot from the 15th of Av, in order to counter the darkness, in order to bring a little more light, to spend a little more time at night learning Torah, to spend a little bit more time doing mitzvahs. And yeah, you're going to argue we're in the southern hemisphere, but we know that everything for us Jews revolves around Israel. That's our center of gravity. And because of that, we do a lot of things, including our periods of time when we pray for rain, etc., that has got to do exclusively with Israel. And so therefore, our obligation, just like anywhere else in the world, is for an increase in Torah learning, an increase in our application to the Torah's mitzvot, to God's mitzvot that He gives us, the mitzvahs that He tells us to do. As we move forward in this period of time, an increase. As we create a little more light, we push away a lot of darkness. Yeah, because how do we get rid of darkness? Darkness is not something that you can sweep away with a broom, that you can suck up in a vacuum cleaner. Darkness is something that is only countered with light. And instead of trying our utmost to fight that darkness, which is always going to be, or unfortunately going to be a losing battle more often than not, we have the opportunity to create a little more light. And as we create that little more light, as we light up another mitzvah, as we light up another little bit of Torah learning, as we bring goodness, kindness, happiness, joy, positivity, positive energy into the world, this not only bodes well for now or for yesterday when we think about the 15th of Av, but for all the days that follow. The season of increasing in light has begun. And as we increase in this light from the 15th of Av, for the next 6 weeks to Rosh Hashanah and thereafter, in the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur, and then after from Yom Kippur through Sukkot, and then all the way through to Hanukkah at the end of our secular or physical year, we know that the additions of light are going to go a long, long way to make a huge, huge difference, not only in the pervading darkness of the world, but for Eretz Yisrael, for our holy land of Israel, for Am Yisrael, for the Jewish people everywhere, and most of all, perhaps for ourselves in our own lives, in our build-up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We'll be back with you to sum up right after this.
Get back to basics with Judaism 101 with Rabbi Michael Katz.
Now, you know, the idea of Simcha, of joy and of happiness, as we know that the 15th of Av was mentioned as one of the happiest days of the Jewish calendar, and Yom Kippur, one of the happiest days of the Jewish calendar. We think about this concept of Simcha that is the very, very the baseline or the aggregate of the way that we are supposed to be and the way we're supposed to behave throughout our lives, and particularly in reference to God and our world and our Torah and our mitzvot. We have to do everything and to participate in everything in a way of simcha. Now, occasionally there is a little bit of sadness. There is something that comes along that places us in a state of sadness and, dare I say, getting into a little bit of a depression and feeling a little bit down. And how could things be so difficult? And why is the world so dark? And why is there so much that's stacked up against us? Now, the only time we're told that we are permitted to have that kind of down, which we sometimes do experience, and let's be practical and real, is in order to promote a rising thereafter of the positive, the good, the simcha, the joy. And sometimes it is the darkness that leads us to much more appreciate the light. When we have been through a period of darkness, we realize just how beautiful it is to see that light. When we have been through a time of restriction and difficulty, like the period of the 3 weeks and the 9 days and Tisha B'Av and so on, when we've been through that, it is so much better, so much more of the feeling that we can convey of, wow, there is this relief, there's the release of the bonds, there's the shackles have been thrown off, and now we can turn and face in a way of simcha, in a way of true joy. We can get our joy back. We can get the hop, skip, and jump back into our step. We can put that into our minds, into our hearts, into our souls, of how we are going to take that, harness that positivity, that positive energy, that feeling of joy, that feeling of simcha, of great and wonderful light, that we are going to harness, and we're going to make that our definition for the coming days, the coming weeks, and the coming years of our lives. And so from the 15th of Av onwards, we create light, we create joy, we bring joy into our lives. It is a time of great simcha. This great release that has happened has been followed by, and needs to be followed by, application of turning to good things, of turning to acts of kindness, of turning to the making amends for the things that perhaps we need to fix, but it all needs to be done in a way of simcha, in a way of joy. And so it is right now that we wish each other joy, happiness, positivity, positive energy. We are now, as we said, 6 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, coming up to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and all those Yamim Noraim, the high festivals. It is time to turn on the taps of simcha, of joy, to go out there and be positive and ensure that through our collective joy, through our individual joy, we'll add to collective joy, and through our collective joy, we will be able to see the immediate arrival of Mashiach Tzidkenu, the coming of Mashiach, with the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash that we mourned and we cried about last week on Tisha B'Av once again, and that things will come to the state of mind and the state of play whereby we once again will be dancing in the vineyards and in the streets of Yerushalayim, the coming of Mashiach. May it happen speedily in our time. And so I want to wish you a great rest of the week, a great Shabbat up ahead. Look forward to being back with you again, same time, same place, next week on another exciting episode of Judaism 101.9.